Counsel?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Arvizo, you mentioned to the sheriffs in one of your initial interviews that Michael had sent gifts to Gavin, correct?
Yes.
And what gifts do you recall Michael Jackson sending to Gavin when Gavin was ill?
When Gavin was ill?
Yes.
Go through the whole list?
Sure, whatever you can remember.
The best I can remember is the computer, I think it was a Bronco. I just have a picture of it. White, Christmas gifts, and that was all, when he was sick.
And what?
That's the best I can remember.
Do you remember anything being delivered at the hospital for Gavin from Michael Jackson?
Yes, a big gift basket.
Okay. Do you remember toys like PlayStation 3, things like that, being delivered to Gavin for Michael?
Okay, I was incorrect in saying PlayStation 3. It was a PlayStation 2, and that was during Christmas time.
Is that all the gifts you remember Gavin ever receiving from Michael Jackson?
This is the best I can remember, when Gavin was sick.
When Gavin wasn't sick, do you remember other gifts being given?
Yes. Michael would send things through like a courier, messenger, something like that, give baskets, and was saying, I love you, Gavin.
Do you remember telling the sheriffs that when Michael Jackson gave those gifts and those messages, you assumed he was trying to cure him, because Gavin was ill? Do you remember saying that?
No, I don't think that's exactly correct how you're saying it. But I feel when Gavin was sick, there were just things that were get-you-well gifts. I guess, I don't know. The only thing that made me uneasy was...
Objection. Move to strike.
Overruled. And you interrupted her answer.
Do you remember telling the sheriffs Michael Jackson would leave messages at your home for Gavin?
Yes. He would leave, what kind of messages? Phone messages?
Yeah, he'll say things like, I'll never forget you, and things like that, right?
Okay, the best I can remember, Gavin had his own private phone number, own answering machine, because his room had to be sterile. And Michael knew that it was his private phone line. And that's where Michael would leave the phone messages.
And you told the sheriffs when you were discussing those messages, referring to Michael Jackson, he's saying it out in the open. You know, he's saying it probably because he's ill, trying to cure him. Do remember that?
Yes. That again is my own cluelessness.
Move to strike.
The part after, yes. After, yes, is that.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, I'll strike it.
Now, you learned at some point that Star, your son Star, had done a video at Neverland with Mr. Jackson, correct?
Yes.
And when did you learn about that video?
I think in Miami. That's when I learned that.
And have you ever seen that video?
I've never seen that video.
Okay, when Star was at Neverland making that video, did he ever discuss it with you?
No.
You've described your first trip to Neverland, okay. When was your second trip to Neverland?
I think it was the Asha and Chris's baby boy's birthday party that Asha and Chris took almost their entire whole family. He had them flown in from Atlanta, Georgia.
And approximately when was that trip?
That was approximately, I think it was early September in 2002.
After your first trip to Neverland, your children went back with David on a couple of occasions, did they not?
Not my children. My two boys. They went. Do you want me to say?
Sure.
Okay. The initial visit, the best I can remember, always, please, dates, best I can remember, is August 2000. And then both my boys returned with David to Neverland. Devellin did not return. Devellin stood with me, so.
Okay, Your Honor, we have lodged with the court a transcript of the Brad Miller interview, and I believe it's Exhibit 5008.
Thank you.
Is it received into evidence?
No.
Let me get this straight now. You went the first time with David and your children, and there were a couple of times after that David just took your sons, correct, to Neverland?
It was one other time.
Okay, was there just one other trip with David and the sons alone?
Yes.
Alright, and when do you think that was?
That was right after, also.
And how long a trip was that, if you remember?
The best I remember, it was also days.
Do you know where your sons stayed, during that trip, in the evening?
No, I don't. The best, you can probably ask the boys.
Did you ever ask them yourself where they had stayed during that next trip with David?
No.
Did you ever ask David where they had stayed during that trip?
No.
Before 2003, how many times did you personally visit Neverland?
Before 2003?
Yes.
Before 2003, best I can remember was the initial visit that I went. I think it was August 2000. And then with Chris and Asha's baby boy's birthday party in early September 2002.
Now, during Chris and Asha's birthday party, Mr. Jackson was not present, right?
Yes. Mr. Jackson was not present.
And did you stay in the guest quarters?
Not at all. It was only a day visit. It was a birthday party. That's all it was.
You came in that morning and left that evening?
Yes.
Now, at some point your children are at Neverland when the Bashir documentary was filmed, right?
Yes.
And do you recall approximately when that was?
Approximately. This is the best I can remember. Gavin had a biopsy done on his kidney. Then the baby boy's birthday party. And then the film that I now know, I'm aware of.
How did your children get to Neverland when the Bashir documentary was filmed, if you know?
Yes. Michael picked them up from my East LA apartment. He had a driver, and then they went over there. They stood the night, and they came the next day.
Did Chris Tucker introduce you to other celebrities?
No, not me. David, yes. And the children.
To your knowledge, what celebrities did Chris Tucker introduce David to?
I don't know.
To your knowledge, what celebrities did Chris Tucker introduce your children to?
I think one of them was Jackie Chan. And that's the best that I'm aware of. That's it.
Do you recall Chris Tucker introducing your children to Mike Tyson?
Oh, that's correct. Yes. Chris took the children to Mike Tyson's house.
Now, was it in Las Vegas?
Yes, this was in Las Vegas.
Were you there during that trip?
There's actually more than one trip there.
Okay. Did you take more than one trip to Las Vegas with Chris Tucker?
No.
Did you take any trips to Las Vegas with Chris Tucker?
One.
Was that the trip when your children met Mike Tyson?
No.
Did you ever meet Mike Tyson?
Never.
Okay. Did you at some point meet Louise Palanker?
Yes, I did.
And where did you meet Louise Palanker?
Through the comedy camp. Through Jamie.
At some point, do you recall Louise Palanker writing a check for $10,000 to you?
What time period are we talking about? At any time?
Sure.
This was when Gavin had become ill.
And do you recall that check being written to Janet Arvizo?
Yes, I became aware of that.
And do you recall it being deposited into your mother's account?
It was cashed through my mom's account.
Did you cash that check?
No.
Did you endorse that check?
Yes, I think I did.
Okay. And do you recall at some point a second $10,000 check being written by Louise Palanker to David Arvizo?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall that check being deposited into your mother's account?
It was cashed through my mom's account.
At that point in time, did you have any bank account?
At that point in time, no, I didn't.
At that point in time, did David have any bank accounts?
No, he didn't. Well, actually, I think, no. The best I can remember, no, I don't think so. I don't know.
At that point in time, had you set up any bank account for Gavin's benefit?
No.
At some point, did you set up a bank account for Gavin's benefit?
Yes, I think so.
Do you know when that was?
I think that was in, the best I can remember, maybe October. Maybe November. That's the best I can remember.
And did you personally deposit money into that account?
Yes.
And was that money that you raised at the Laugh Factory?
No.
Was that money that you got from fundraisers for Gavin?
With, attached to the Laugh Factory?
No. Let me rephrase the question. The money that you deposited into the account you set up for Gavin, do you remember that account?
I don't think I personally deposited things. They were deposited.
Okay. That was an account set up at, was it Washington Mutual?
Yes.
And that was across from the Laugh Factory, wasn't it?
Pardon me?
Was that bank near the Laugh Factory?
There's Washington Mutuals everywhere.
Was this particular branch near the Laugh Factory where you opened the account?
No, it wasn't.
Where was it?
The best I can remember, it was done, I think, near the Hollenbeck division.
And you made deposits for the benefit of Gavin, right?
I think the majority of them, they were deposited on their own.
So people went to the bank and deposited money on their own into Gavin's account?
I think so, yes.
Did you ever deposit any money into that account for Gavin's benefit?
The best I can remember, I don't think so.
Alright, now, when the $10,000 check that Louise Palanker wrote to you was placed into your mother's account, you say that it was basically, cash was taken out immediately. Is that correct?
The best I can remember, I think there had to be a waiting period or something like that. And then it could be cashed.
And you endorsed the check, right?
Yes, I think so.
And did you get some of the money?
No, everything was handed to David. David loved having the sense of authority, and I was like his personal secretary.
So you're saying none of that money went to your benefit, right?
It was, like I said, David had the authority. I was like David's personal secretary.
Okay, so you're telling the jury that you never spent any of that money for yourself, correct?
I'm telling the jury I was like David's personal secretary.
Did any of that money go to the benefit of Gavin, to your knowledge?
I think so.
Do you know so?
I think so.
You're not sure?
No, I think so.
Okay, what do you think it went to?
Objection. Asked and answered.
Overruled. You may answer.
I think it went to credit cards, to food, to just different things. Whatever David would instruct me to do.
And the second $10,000 check that Louise Palanker wrote was also.
I was referring to both.
Okay.
So it's going to be the same information.
Okay, let me just go through the second one, make sure. Louise Palanker wrote the first check for $10,000 to Janet Arvizo. It was deposited for cash, and you believe it was spent on matters related to Gavin, correct?
No, there was, Louise Palanker, there was no strings attached. It was just to the family.
And you're not sure what that was spent on. You think credit cards, right?
We're talking 5 years ago. And the best I can remember, it was to the family, and I did everything that David instructed me to do.
Let me ask you about the second $10,000 check from Louise Palanker.
Again, I'm lumping both of them. Because it was both the same thing.
So as far as the second $10,000 check goes, you pretty much did what David asked you to do with the money, right?
That's correct.
Alright, and other than credit cards, you're not that sure what it was spent on, right?
No.
You think maybe food, right?
I think so.
Okay.
And whatever David kept for his pocket.
And you never kept any for your pocket, right?
No.
Okay. Were you employed at that point?
Yes, I was.
And where were you working then?
I was a waitress.
Okay. Where was that?
The Bonaventure Hotel.
And is that when Gavin was in the hospital?
Yes.
Okay. And did you work there full time?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did you learn at some point about some fundraisers that went on at the Laugh Factory for the benefit of Gavin?
I came to find out everything afterwards.
Did you know those fundraisers were going on when they actually happened?
I don't think so. We're talking 5 years ago.
So you're not sure whether you knew they were even going on when they happened, right?
No, I would find out afterwards.
Now, were you in touch with Jamie Masada at this point in time?
Just a little bit.
Was he a friend of yours at that point in time?
Yes, he is a friend of mine. And he was a friend of mine at that point.
And he still is a friend of yours, right?
He still is a friend.
Alright, and you had met him when your kids were going through the comedy camp, right?
Yes.
You knew him to have assisted Gavin when Gavin was ill in the hospital, right?
Yes.
You were in touch with him at that point in time, right?
Yes.
But you're not sure if you knew when these fundraisers were going on.
That's correct. I would find out afterwards. And not because David told me, but because Jamie would tell me.
Do you recall Fritz Coleman, the newscaster, helping with any fundraiser?
No.
Do you recall do you recall George Lopez ever trying to help Gavin?
No.
Knew nothing about that?
No.
Okay. Never met with him and thanked him for what he had done for your family.
No. I thanked him through Ann Lopez, because Ann Lopez would pray with me on the phone.
Did you ever meet with George Lopez and give him a gift and thank him for what he had done?
I had given him a mustard seed faith amulet, because he had told me that he had lost his keychain, so I had given mine, the one I would carry.
Okay, so when any fundraisers were being planned at the Laugh Factory for Gavin, you were not involved, right?
That is correct.
And Jamie Masada didn't tell you what he was planning, right?
This is correct.
Okay, Louise Palanker never told you what she was planning, correct?
This is correct.
And you don't even know who attended those fundraisers, right?
This is correct.
Because you never discussed a fundraiser with Louise Palanker, right?
This is correct.
Never discussed a fundraiser with Fritz Coleman, right?
This is correct.
And never discussed a fundraiser with Jamie Masada, right?
This is correct.
Do you recall ever speaking to someone at a local newspaper in El Monte about Gavin's illness?
Yes.
And who did you speak to about Gavin's illness?
The best I can remember, I think her name was Christy. And she had expressed to me. I felt sorry for her, because she had told me that she was an elderly lady and she was trying to start a new career in journalism, because she never had the chance. So when she expressed herself like that, I went ahead and spoke to her about my son's illness.
So you were really doing her a favor is what you're saying.
Objection. Argumentative.
Sustained.
Are you saying you were trying to help this person with her career? That's why you spoke about Gavin?
Objection. Argumentative and irrelevant.
Just a minute. I'll sustain the objection as argumentative.
Do you recall asking Miss Causer to put an article in her newspaper so you could raise money for Gavin?
I think how this came about, if I'm trying to understand his question, was I went ahead and spoke to her about my son's illness because the editor there is David's good friend of his sister, and it was David and his sister that went to this editor and brought this about. I purely wanted to speak to her only about my son's illness because she had expressed to me that she was an elderly lady trying to start a new career.
Did you tell this lady that it cost $12,000 per chemo treatment for Gavin?
What I told this lady was that it was $1,200 for it's called Neupogen injections. Gavin had to have these injections right after chemotherapy. So when it appeared that way, it was a typo. They added an extra zero, first of all. And then second, I had expressed to her that continuously we're experiencing miracles, and that when David had went to the where they were processing the Neupogen injections, they made him aware how much this would cost if it would have came out of anybody's pocket. But, no, at no time did I say it was costing us a single penny. So I told her basically that it was a miracle of God that it was being covered.
You're telling the jury that you told her it was $1,200 for a treatment, and there was a typo that said $12,000?
No, that's correct. $1,200 for the Neupogen injections, not for the treatment injections. And if you want to be completely, that's part of his care.
Did you see the article that appeared in the Mid-Valley News?
Yes, I did.
And did you ever complain about what was in the article?
David said he was going to take care of it, because David's sister is the editor's real good friend, and David's sister and the editor and David had. This is where that had originated.
You told Miss Causer that several celebrities were doing fundraisers to help pay for Gavin's chemotherapy, didn't you?
I think what I told her was that they were helping. And to me, help meant sitting by Gavin, feeding him the water, the cantaloupe, things like that. That's what I meant by help.
Did you tell Miss Causer that various celebrities were doing fundraisers to help pay for Gavin's chemotherapy?
No.
Did you complain to Ms. Causer that the first article about Gavin did not mention the bank account at Washington Mutual?
No.
And did you ever complain to Ms. Causer about the typo which said chemo cost $12,000 per treatment?
David said he was going to take care of it because the editor was David's sister's good friend.
Do you recall Miss Causer visiting your address on Raymer Street?
She did come to where my son's sterile room was, and that would be my mother's home.
And do you recall her bringing a turkey?
No, she didn't bring a turkey.
Do you recall anyone from that newspaper ever bringing you a turkey?
No.
And did you ever complain to anyone at that newspaper that a turkey wasn't enough? You wanted, in effect, money?
That's incorrect.
I'm going to object as to the content of an article as impeachment.
The objection is overruled. You may answer. She was interrupted. Have the question read back.
I remember it. It's incorrect.
You do remember the article appearing, though, right?
The one that you guys encouraged to be put out there?
No, the one that you encouraged to appear in the Mid-Valley News.
The one that I helped the lady with, yes. But it didn't say nothing about no turkey dinner there.
Did you do anything to help arrange for any fundraisers for Gavin at any time?
No.
Did you ever ask anyone for any assistance at any time for Gavin?
No.
At some point you said to the sheriffs you did not trust Chris Tucker, correct?
He's taking that out of context.
I'll object as irrelevant, the question, and non-responsive. Move to strike.
The objection is overruled.
Chris Tucker.
Just a moment. Read the question back to her.
At some point you said to the sheriffs you did not trust Chris Tucker, correct?
That's incorrect. He's taking it out of context. Chris Tucker is a decent person. It was in response to afterwards. Chris Tucker was butting around with Michael afterwards. That's all that was referring to. I didn't trust, because he may have innocently communicated something to Michael, and since I already was in the process of deprogramming my children from being brainwashed, that I didn't want Chris Tucker to communicate something innocently to him, and that was it. Chris Tucker has always been a decent person to my children.
Move to strike.
After, that's incorrect, is stricken.
Now, you indicated at one point that Brett Ratner, You indicated at one point that Brett Ratner met your family, true?
Yes.
And did you personally meet Brett Ratner?
I personally was not introduced to him, but I knew that he was the director.
And how did you learn who he was?
Because Chris Tucker had pointed him out to me, that he was the director.
Have you ever met him to this day?
I never was introduced.
Have you ever talked to him on the phone?
I've never talked to him on the telephone.
Okay. Do you know how many fundraisers took place at the Laugh Factory to help your family?
No.
Do you know, as you sit here today, when any fundraisers at the Laugh Factory took place for your family?
As I sit here today, how many?
Yes.
No.
Do you know approximately when any fundraisers took place at the Laugh Factory for your family?
No.
Did you ever see Jamie Masada at the hospital when Gavin was ill?
I think maybe once.
And did you ever discuss with Jamie Masada efforts being made to raise money at the Laugh Factory?
No.
Do you recall Fritz Coleman, the newscaster, visiting your home in East Los Angeles?
Yes, I do. This was before my son was ill.
Were you there during the visit?
Yes, I was there.
Were you ever aware at any time that Fritz Coleman had tried to raise some money for your family?
No.
When's the last time you saw Fritz Coleman?
Let me see. I think the best I can remember I think he was at the hospital and he was already leaving when I was arriving. I think that's the best I can remember. So it was a matter of just minutes.
Okay. Did you ever speak to comedian George Lopez about Gavin?
Yes.
And approximately when did you speak to comedian George Lopez about Gavin?
I think when he first became ill, and then the next time when he was visiting Gavin. And I gave him the mustard seed amulet keychain.
Did you ever know anything about George Lopez trying to put together a fundraiser for Gavin?
No.
Did you ever discuss with Louise Palanker ways to raise money for the family?
No.
Do you know why Louise Palanker wrote her first $10,000 check to Janet Arvizo?
I think that's because David requested that way.
Okay, you don't know for sure, right?
Well, I believe Wheezy, because she's the one that wrote the check for the money.
Okay.
Wheezy is Louise Palanker.
Were you the signatory on the bank account at Washington Mutual, which was set up for the benefit of Gavin?
What does signatory mean?
Were you the one who could sign to withdraw money from the bank?
Yes. David requested it that way because David owed his brother in the thousands of dollars, so he wanted to point out to his brother Ray that I was the one that's it.
Was he a signatory on that account, to your knowledge?
No, he wasn't.
Did you ever withdraw any money from the account?
Yes, I did.
How much do you think you withdrew?
Well, everything that had always been put in.
Do you remember roughly how much was in there at any time?
No, I can't remember.
Were there thousands of dollars in there, to your knowledge?
There was thousands. And I went ahead and gave all that information to the police and the DA's office.
Did you ever withdraw any money yourself from that account?
Yes, of course I did.
Did you withdraw thousands of dollars from that account?
Yes, I sure did.
Was any of that money used for medical expenses?
No, there was no need for medical expenses in the hospital, because everything was covered through Kaiser.
Okay, and were you ever aware that anyone donated money to that account to help with medical expenses?
No.
Now, you've told the jury you told someone at the Mid-Valley News about $1,200 per type of treatment, correct?
And I was expressing to her that thank God our family is experiencing a lot of miracles, and that was covered.
And you never mentioned the word chemotherapy to that person, true?
I think I did. It was a little story about my son being ill.
Did you ever mention the cost of chemotherapy to Miss Causer?
I'm going to object as asked and answered.
Overruled. You may answer.
I think what I was telling her was a story complete about the miracles that we were experiencing. That's it.
Did you know the article was going to be published?
Yes.
Did you see it when it was published?
Yes, I did. And that's when David said he was going to take care of it.
And based on what you read, did you think it was a request for assistance?
No.
Okay, now, did you go with Chris Tucker to Knott's Berry Farm?
No.
And did your children?
Yes.
Do you know when that was?
Yes. They went with Chris, Asha, David and the children.
Do you know approximately when that was?
When Gavin was ill.
Were you talking to Asha Pryor on a regular basis at that point?
I don't think so.
Okay, when did you start communicating with Asha Pryor on a pretty regular basis?
Our friendship. Probably. It just grew very slowly, to the point where we were speaking almost maybe 4 times a week. But it started out very slow.
Did you ever tell Asha Pryor that all of the money that came from the fundraisers for Gavin was spent on David's drug habit?
I don't think so. It may have.
No?
It may have probably. I know the children and I had conversations with her. So.
Did you ever tell Asha Pryor that the money from the fundraisers for Gavin was spent on David's drug habit?
I don't think so.
Do you know for sure?
I'm for sure more towards I don't think so.
Isn't it true that after you told Asha Pryor that the money for the fundraisers was spent by David on drugs, she went to her bank and got a $600 check for you and the family?
Objection. Compound in assuming facts not in evidence.
All sustain the compound.
Do you remember Asha Pryor going to a bank and getting a $600 cashier's check for you and the family?
He's incorrect.
Did she ever do that?
You're letting me answer? Okay, Asha was leaving out of town to Atlanta, Georgia. She had told me. Me and the children had bought her, Chris and the baby, some Christmas gifts. Asha then told me, Janet, I don't have time for shopping. Please buy the children some Christmas gifts. She's flying out of town to go to Atlanta, Georgia. And that's what happened.
But you never mentioned to Asha anything about fundraisers for Gavin, true?
No.
You never mentioned to Asha that money from fundraisers went to support David's drug habit?
I don't think so.
Do you remember telling Asha that David was taking money from fundraisers for Gavin?
I don't think so.
Do you remember having a discussion about fundraisers for Gavin with anybody?
No.
Do you remember receiving any money from Chris Tucker?
I became aware of this afterwards, now, through the police investigation, that he had wired some money into the account.
Which account?
The Washington Mutual.
That was the account you were a signatory on, correct?
You've explained, signatory, so it's still the same meaning the way you're using it, correct?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Which I withdrew the money and gave it to David.
And you're telling the jury under oath that you never knew Chris Tucker had wired that money into that account until the police told you?
That's correct.
Do you know approximately when this was?
Now, per the police investigation, I think it was in December or January. I think it was within those months.
And you had received.
And at that point, that's when Chris and David was going everywhere with Chris.
And that's the point in time where you were associating quite a bit with Asha, right?
No, our friendship did not begin with Asha until David was out of the picture. I hardly even spoke to Asha. My friendship did not begin with her until David was out of the picture.
And where did the $2,000 from Chris Tucker go, if you know?
Well, yeah, I withdrew it and gave it to David, and that's when David had gone to Las Vegas.
So, to your knowledge, you gave that money to David and it wasn't used for the benefit of Gavin, right?
This is correct.
Do you recall any discussion with Asha or Chris Tucker about your family getting the use of one of Chris's cars?
Okay, say that again.
Do you recall any discussion with Chris Tucker or Asha about your family using one of Chris's vehicles?
Okay, I don't know what he's asking.
All object as non-responsive, or vague. She doesn't understand the question.
Overruled. All have the question read back.
Okay.
Do you recall any discussion with Chris Tucker or Asha about your family using one of Chris's vehicles?
It's incorrect the way he's saying it. Asha had her birthday. Chris had taken the children to go pick out a brand new Mercedes for Asha. The children picked out the color for Asha, and Chris went ahead and purchased it. And that was Chris's birthday gift, to Asha. And so the car that Asha was driving, months later, Chris and Asha gave it to me and the children for a Christmas gift, but I never have driven it. I don't have it. I don't have ownership of it. But that's what he's referring to.
Did you ever ask anyone if you could use that car?
Never.
Did you ever complain to anyone that you were supposed to be able to own that car?
Never.
How did you learn about the car?
Well, because Chris had given me the keys and told me, this is a Christmas gift. This is Asha's old car, but Asha and me want you and the kids to have it, because Asha had been given for her birthday a brand new Mercedes.
Didn't you complain to Asha that you had no car to drive?
No, I didn't complain to Asha. It was okay for me. I was on the bus continuously.
Did you ever tell Chris you needed a car to drive?
Never.
And never told that to Asha either, right?
No.
Did you ever know why Chris Tucker would even discuss letting you use his car?
He would never let me use his car. Like I said, he gave it to me and the kids as a Christmas gift, because it was Asha's old car that was just sitting in her driveway. No one had no need for it.
To your knowledge, did Devellin ever call Asha Pryor on your behalf asking for the keys to the car?
No, Chris had already given me the keys.
And you think he just came over there one day and just said, here's a gift?
Objection. Argumentative.
Sustained.
Do you know why Mr. Tucker was giving a gift of a car to you?
Objection. Asked and answered and speculative.
Sustained.
Do you recall Devellin telling Asha prior words to the effect, "I can't wait until you get another new car. Then I can have the Mercedes." Do you recall that ever?
No.
Do you recall complaining to Asha prior about the Germans?
Yes. I made her aware. That's another thing I slipped in. I tried my best.
You told her you didn't like these German people around Michael Jackson, correct?
No.
Well, you did complain about them to her, right?
I didn't complain. I made her aware. I tried to make different people aware so me and my children could get help.
You told Asha prior you didn't like the Germans, right?
Objection. Asked and answered.
You never complained to Asha prior about being held against your will at any time, did you?
I believe there was an objection, Your Honor.
Oh.
He changed the question, so.
I made her aware that they were not letting us go.
To your knowledge, did she ever do anything about that?
I don't know.
After she drove your children to Neverland, did you speak to her?
No.
How did you know your children got to Neverland?
Because Michael's people had tabs on them. They were being followed.
How did you know your children got to Neverland?
Because Frank told Vinny and Vinny told me.
And did you ever tell it to Asha prior after she drove the children?
No. On that day, no.
Do you remember telling Mrs. Pryor that you had errands to run and asked her to drive your children to Neverland?
Me?
Yes.
No.
Okay. Did you tell Asha Pryor about your friendship with Marie Nicole?
Never.
Ever tell Asha Pryor you liked the Casio children?
No.
Ever talk with Asha Pryor about Miko Brando?
No.
Do you know who Miko Brando is?
Yes.
Who is Miko Brando?
He would die for Michael. That's who he is.
Who is Miko Brando, if you know?
I think.
Objection. Lack of foundation.
Overruled.
And relevance.
Overruled. You may answer.
I think I met him once. He had actually came to bring.
Just a minute. The question is, who is Miko Brando?
He's one of Michael's damage control, personnel assistant. He has a lot of titles.
Do you know if he's related to the late Marlon Brando?
This I became aware.
Okay. What did you become aware of?
All object as speculative, lack of foundation, and relevance.
Sustained.
Did you meet Miko Brando at Neverland?
Yes, once.
Approximately when was that?
When he came to deliver Mr. Jackson some things.
Was it your understanding he was the son of Marlon Brando?
Objection. Asked and answered.
At that time, no.
Did you ever have a discussion with?
Just a moment. The objection is sustained. The answer is stricken. Next question.
Did you ever have a discussion with Miko Brando?
No.
But you met him, right?
Yes.
Okay. And was it your understanding that he worked at Neverland?
Objection. Asked and answered.
Overruled. You may answer.
Okay. It was my understanding that he had multiple roles, multiple titles. One being damage control. Another one, positive PR. Another one personal assistant. He wore many hats.
Do you remember telling Asha Pryor that you had learned that Michael Jackson was not going on the Brazil trip?
No.
Do you remember ever telling Asha Pryor that once you learned Michael Jackson was not going on the Brazil trip, you didn't want to go?
No.
And it's your testimony you never discussed the Brazil trip at any time with Asha?
Like I said to different people in the midst of the conversation, I tried to slip something in as to what was happening.
Do you recall complaining to Asha Pryor that Michael Jackson was making money on the Maury Povich show and your family was getting nothing?
Never.
Do you recall commenting to Mrs. Pryor that a college fund was being set up for Gavin by Michael Jackson?
No.
Do you remember telling Asha Pryor, "What good will a college fund do for my son? He may not be alive in 10 years." Do you remember saying that?
No.
Do you remember telling Asha Pryor that you had not signed releases for the rebuttal video?
He's incorrect. No.
Did you ever discuss the rebuttal video with Asha Pryor?
No.
Ever complain to Asha Pryor that phone calls were being monitored at Neverland?
I informed her that the phone calls were being monitored. Like I said, I tried to make people aware of what really was happening in there.
Did you make your lawyer, Michael Manning, aware at any time?
Yes, I did.
Michael Manning never called the police, right?
That's right.
Objection. Lack of foundation.
Sustained. The answer's stricken.
Did you ask Louise Palanker if you could meet her at Yvonne's?
I think I did. That's when I was in a period, in the Calabasas period.
Did you ask Louise Palanker if you can meet her at her home?
I think I did. I was trying anything possible to leave the grasp of him and his people.
Do you know when you first met Bill Dickerman, the attorney?
I think I met him approximately. The best I can remember is the 25th, because it was the same day that I had that visit, and it was on the way to over there.
Do you remember complaining to Asha Pryor that you were being kept away from Michael Jackson?
No.
Did you ever complain to her that the Germans were keeping you away from Michael Jackson?
No. What I was telling her was that they were keeping. Maybe you're taking that out of context. That I wasn't able to see my children anymore.
Did you ever complain to anyone that the people around Michael Jackson were separating Mr. Jackson from you and your family?
No. They were separating me from my children. By the end, I had no control of my kids anymore. I had lost them.
Move to strike.
Denied.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, but I have to go to the restroom.
All right.
I've been holding it here.
All right. Would you take her back there?
Can Mr. Jackson go as well?
We're not taking a break. Just to the witness. Let's see. Mr. Mesereau. Maybe someone from the district attorney on the hard drives, if you'll approach the bench. Maybe we could discuss that for a moment.
If I could, Your Honor, Mr. Sanger would.
Yes. Whoever. That's fine. Discussion held off the record at sidebar.
Thank you.
Are you ready?
Thank you.
Excuse me. Go ahead, Mr. Mesereau.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Arvizo, to this date, have you ever watched the Maury Povich rebuttal video?
No.
Ever discussed it with anybody?
No.
And did I hear you correctly that you said you had never actually watched the entire Bashir documentary?
That's correct. In Miami I wanted to see it. Now I don't want to see it.
Did you ever discuss the Bashir documentary with anyone?
No.
Now, you indicated that you saw Mr. Jackson licking your son's head on a plane, right?
Yes, this is correct.
And you told the jury you at first did not believe what you were seeing, right?
Yes.
After that flight, did you ever allow your children back to Neverland?
Yes.
How many times?
Well, the whole entire time until we permanently left in March.
If you can recall, how many times did you let your children go back to Neverland after you claim you saw your son's head being licked?
The whole entire time until March.
And how many times would that be, back and forth?
The best, I can't remember, but we've already walked through that.
Do you think it was 4 times you let your children go back to Neverland?
They were there the whole entire time except for that time that Jesus had taken us out. Poor judgment on my part.
Move to strike.
I know now.
Just a moment. Strike the last sentence. Go ahead.
Would it be safe to say you're not sure how many times your kids returned to Neverland after the head-licking incident?
The only time my children were out of their grasp was when Jesus had taken me and my children to my mom's house. But the rest of the time, they were. Even if they were outside, Michael's people were still on my children. So if you want to get very specific, my children only made it out of there once. Because all the other entire time, Michael's people were on them.
How many times did they go back and forth to Neverland after?
Objection. Asked and answered.
He wasn't allowed to finish his question. Go ahead, counsel.
Did your children go back and forth to Neverland after the Jesus incident?
Objection. Asked and answered.
Overruled. You may answer.
Okay, except for that time with Jesus, the rest of the entire time, Michael's people were on my children.
When did you first learn that Gavin claimed he'd been drinking alcohol at Neverland?
The day I never went back. That's the day. And it's burned in here.
Move to strike.
Denied.
Do you know what day that was?
Yes. I will never forget the date. It was March 10th. 4 a.m., to be exact.
You had never had any indication that Gavin had ever touched alcohol before that day, correct?
This is correct. I know different now.
Move to strike.
Strike the last sentence.
Do you remember telling the Santa Barbara sheriffs in an interview, "There's plenty of police out there that can protect my kids"?
He's
Vague as to time. Objection.
Sustained.
When did you first tell anyone that there were threats to kill your family from people associated with Michael Jackson?
I think the best I can remember. The best I can remember. Let's see. The best I think I can remember is Mr. Dickerman.
Was that in a meeting with Jamie Masada?
I don't remember that. I just remember being. When I finally was able to say everything was with the Santa Barbara Sheriff's officers.
Do you know approximately what month that was?
I think, the best I can remember. Finally I think it was in July. I think. That's the best I can remember.
And that was after you had met with Larry Feldman, correct?
Oh, yes.
It was actually long after you had first met with attorney Larry Feldman, right?
My meetings with Mr. Feldman. He couldn't make out. We were basically all, cuckoos after him. It was all cuckoo. Our whole home environment was cuckoo. So he basically wanted to make heads and tails. He just basically wanted to help.
And your discussion about anyone threatening to kill your family first occurred long after you met attorney Larry Feldman, true?
I wanted to tell that to the sheriffs. I wanted to tell that to the police officers, let them be the first. I remember asking Mr. Dickerman that I wanted to share that information with the police.
And in none of Mr. Dickerman's letters involving your family did he talk about threats to kill, correct?
Because I expressed to him that I wanted to tell the police, because that would have gave them the opportunity to see that I was trying to make contact with the police.
Do you remember going shopping while you were staying at the Calabasas Inn?
Yes.
And tell the jury where you went shopping.
I think it was an outlet store, and also a Robinson's May. And this is what, with their positive PR film crew following us.
Objection. Non-responsive.
Sustained as to the last sentence.
While you were shopping, you didn't ever complain to anyone you were being held against your will, true?
Incorrect. I called Wheezy.
Did you call the police?
No.
If you could call Wheezy, why couldn't you call the police?
Because I couldn't. I was hoping she would.
Which phone did you use to call Wheezy?
I don't remember.
Was it a cell phone?
I had no cell phone at that time.
Was it a phone in the hotel?
I don't think so.
Was it a phone at the shopping center?
I don't remember.
You didn't dial 911, did you?
That's correct. But I have now.
After meeting with 2 attorneys, correct?
He's incorrect.
When you appeared for the Department of Children's and Social Services interviews, did you believe you, yourself, were being investigated?
Can you be more clear?
Sure. When you had the meeting with the Department of Children and Social Services representatives at Major Jackson's home, did you believe you were being investigated? Yes or no, if you could, please.
Yes.
Okay. And did you believe you were being investigated because someone had made a complaint about the Bashir documentary?
All this I came to find out after the meeting. But before the meeting, I had no understanding whatsoever.
So you didn't know why you were there?
This is correct.
Did you ever tell the sheriffs that you were there because somebody complained about the Bashir documentary called Living with Michael Jackson, and wanted the mother investigated?
Yes, I came to find this after.
Do you remember at the beginning of your interview with the Department of Children and Family Services you asked what your rights were?
Yes.
And why did you do that?
Because that was Vicky Podbiersky's instructions.
Vicky Podbiersky was the lawyer that you had spoken to, right?
This is the attorney who put fear in me right before the video, and she claims she was Michael Jackson's attorney and Garrigas's attorney.
The fear she put into you was you better handle it properly or you could lose your children, correct?
The fear that she put in me was that I could possibly have my children ripped away from me forever and probably won't see them for a long time. That's the fear she put in me.
Did you tell her you had been investigated on other occasions by the Department of Children and Family Services?
No. Brad Miller, his PI, dialed the phone number, gave me his cell phone, and there she was.
And did you speak to her?
Yes, she spoke to me.
Did she give you advice about how to handle a meeting with the Department of Children and Family Services, to your knowledge?
Because I declined, she wanted to be present, she had gave me information, and now I know why. They wanted all.
Objection. Non-responsive.
Sustained.
How long was your interview with the Department of Children and Family Services?
Well, let me see. Asaf arrived there. He tape recorded the meeting illegally, and then maybe a total of about 35, 30, 40 minutes. Because the time frame of Asaf tape recording the meeting was about 20 minutes.
By the way, on one of your sheriff's interviews, do you recall saying that there are no clocks or calendars at Neverland?
What I remember was that. What I was trying to communicate, that in my bedroom, I had none of these things in my bedroom.
You told them at Neverland there are no clocks, correct?
Yes, because I was in the guest house. For the end part of the time, I wasn't allowed to come out anymore.
Are there no clocks at Neverland?
On the ground, yes, there is.
Now, the people you claim were telling you that your family were going to be killed are Frank, Vinny, Dieter, and Ron, right?
Right. Ronald and Dieter were replaced by Frank and Vinny. But the initial meeting was with Michael. Michael told me, but what started it off was Michael.
Telling you your family was going to be killed.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
First it was Gavin, and then it went to my 3 children, in Miami.
Do you recall ever telling a sheriff's investigator that Miller told you that Mr. Jackson was buying you a house and an apartment?
I don't remember saying that.
Would it refresh your recollection if I just show you a page of the transcript of your interview?
What I think he's referring is totally different. He's taking it maybe out of context. But, yeah, bring it on over.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
What page is that, counsel?
It's 9 of this interview. The interview is August 13, 2003.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, this is what I had talked to you about already. That we had to leave the country.
Have you had a chance to look at that page?
I just looked at the highlighted words. I didn't read anything.
Does it refresh your recollection about what you told the sheriffs?
That's because we had to leave the country.
Did you tell the sheriffs that Brad Miller told you that they were buying you a house and an apartment?
What I was trying to point out to the police department was this is what they were trying to do in order for me to leave the country. And there's no house and no apartment, because I don't want to leave the country. And because they're lies. What I was trying to point out is they were using different tactics.
All object as non-responsive.
Sustained.
Because they wanted me out of the country.
Objection. Non-responsive.
I had sustained the objection.
Did you think you were getting a house from Michael Jackson?
No, I was pointing out to the police that they were trying to do everything possible to get access into my apartment, to go clean it up, to go remove all the letters and items that Michael had given Gavin. This is what I was trying to point out to the police. And second, that they wanted me and my children out of this country really bad.
Did you tell the jury that the plan was for you to go to Brazil and never come back?
That's what their plan was ultimately. That they were going to decide. Depending if they did positive PR, cleaned all the mess for Michael, then they were going to decide at that point in time if I could return. If.
Did you ever see any documents that said it was a 2-week trip?
That don't matter.
Did you ever see any documents that said the trip to Brazil was a 2-week trip?
Don't. And if you look at the documents, it's not going to be within the time frame that I was supposed to leave. They choreograph everything.
Did anyone ever mention to you in any form, verbal or in a document, that this was a planned 2-week trip?
No, it wasn't. I know that.
Did you ever see a document that said that?
Never. But like I said, they choreograph everything.
Okay, so when you told the sheriffs that Brad Miller said they were buying you a house and an apartment, you were not suggesting you wanted one, right?
That is correct.
Okay, did you tell the Department of Social Services that your children were being sent to a private school?
No, I didn't. Vinny himself, straight from his mouth, told Karen Walker.
That your kids were going to a private school?
Yes. This is another lie.
Okay, did you believe Vinny when he said that?
No, that's why I was behind Karen Walker saying, no. I was going like that.
Is that when you didn't tell Karen Walker you were held against your will?
This is correct.
Now, you make some references in some of your sheriff's interviews to speaking in code. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And what code were you speaking in?
This is what I've already explained to the jurors, is that in the midst of my conversations I'd try to slip something in, or I would say one word, say another sentence and say another word, hoping that when a person would sit or think, they'd say, wait a minute, that word doesn't match this. I was constantly trying to leave clues for people.
Did you leave any clues for Major J. Jackson when you stayed at his home?
Yes, I tried. Yes. When I finally left the nail shop, that's when I finally told him everything. Because Asaf had pointed out that there was another tape recording being, and Frank and Vinny told me they can hear everything, so I believed them.
So you believed J. Jackson's phones were being tapped?
Yes.
Did you believe the phones at the salon were being tapped?
When I finally was able, I told him, come on over, and then that was it. Permanently left Neverland forever, thank God.
Did you believe the phones at the salon were being tapped?
No, that's why. I didn't know what they could do. Because they said I was being constantly listened and monitored, so I went ahead and tried.
Do you remember visiting a federal building to get a passport?
Yes.
Who were you with?
Vinny, the people that were following us.
Do you remember walking into that federal building to get your passport?
Yes. Vinny and the people that were following us, yes.
Do you remember speaking to anyone in that federal building as you got your passports?
No, I just stood by Vinny and the children, and that's it.
Did you see any federal employees or agents in that federal building?
Yes, and I wanted to reach for them so bad.
Did you complain to any of them that you were being held against your will?
No, because at that point my parents' lives were at risk. And until I can see my parents and tell them what was the danger, I couldn't say a single thing. They had full control of me.
Did you complain to anyone in that federal building that any crimes were being committed against you or your family?
No, I did not.
Did you ever try to dial 911 to reach any police officer?
No, but I have now.
Now, you're aware that in your family law proceeding, your ex-husband David claims that you sat down and scripted your children in the J.C. Penney case, correct?
Yes. Amongst many things David has said.
Did you ever sit down and rehearse your children about what to say in depositions in the J.C. Penney case?
He's giving me too much credit. No.
To your knowledge, did your children always tell the truth when they testified under oath in the J.C. Penney case?
Except for the part about David.
What about the part about your injuries? Did they tell the truth, to your knowledge?
Yes.
Okay, now, that was when. That was a situation where Gavin was caught running out of the store with something that wasn't paid for, correct?
This is what I came to understand, because I wasn't present when that happened.
And you told the police that Gavin was just trying to trick his father into paying for those goods, right?
No, I did not tell them that.
What did you tell them the reason Gavin did that was?
At that point, when I talked to the police, I wasn't aware of what happened.
Did you ever learn that that was the reason why Gavin left the store with unpurchased goods?
Yes, I came to find out afterwards. The police told me themselves.
Now, did you ever learn about an incident with George Lopez where there was a claim that money had been taken from Gavin's wallet?
I came to find out afterwards by Jamie.
And did you talk to George ever about that event?
No.
Ever talk to his wife about that event?
No.
Ever talk to David about that event?
No.
Ever talk to Gavin about that event?
No.
Now, you told the sheriffs that Mr. Jackson's people had done background investigations on Jay Jackson. Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
And how did you know that anyone associated with Mr. Jackson had done a background investigation on Jay Jackson?
His dear damage control people and Frank told me that.
They told you they had checked out who Jay Jackson was.
Yes, Frank told me that.
Okay, so you were aware that Mr. Garrigas's employees were doing investigations into who you were and Jay Jackson.
No, you're incorrect.
Was correct?
Frank had told me that they had done all this information so they can choreograph their story. That's why.
In that recorded phone conversation you had with Frank, which we played on Friday, you never mention anything about killers, do you?
I'm sure I did. And since he had control of that, illegally taping, I'm sure they either erased it, manipulated it or took it off. But if it was left to me, I would have left it on there. But it didn't benefit him to leave it on there.
You never mention killers in that recorded phone conversation, do you?
I'm sure I did, but Frank had control of the tape.
Okay, do you recall a blood drive at Neverland for Gavin?
Yes, I was the one responsible for that. Anywhere where I can gather 50 people or more, Kaiser was willing to go and take their own bloodmobile, because it benefited not just Gavin, many children and hospital patients. So I was continuously asking for anybody that can gather more than 50 people, that Kaiser themselves would go over there.
And Mr. Jackson allowed you to use his property for a blood drive, correct?
All his employees gave blood. All of his employees that wanted to could donate blood. Not just to Gavin, but to many people, because they were trying to find O negative, C and B negative blood for Gavin.
And to your knowledge, Mr. Jackson allowed you to do this blood drive on his property, correct?
Yes, this is correct.
And approximately when was this blood drive?
Oh, when Gavin was ill in 2000.
Okay.
But, you know, he wasn't the only one. There was many church groups. Many people that had gathered. And the bloodmobile would go out to those particular places.
At one point you told the sheriffs that you didn't think Michael was really involved in that, right?
Yes, and I've also communicated to you. In the beginning, I thought it was only the Germans, but now I know different per their hard work, investigative working, that it was different.
I'm going to object as non-responsive and also object to the question as vague. Involved with what?
I can rephrase it, Your Honor.
Well, now the time to object to the question is long gone, but I'll sustain the objection to the last part of the answer. Next question.
Did you work with someone named Grace at the blood drive for Gavin?
No, I didn't work there. All I had done was ask Grace if she could ask permission, because remember, that's another indicator that I didn't talk to Michael himself.
Objection. Non-responsive.
Sustained.
Do you remember complaining to the sheriffs in an interview about Michael Jackson? Here's a man that has so much wealth, and yet did not even hire my children a single tutor when they're supposed to be in school. Do you remember complaining about that?
I didn't complain to him. I was trying to point out to the police that these were the things that now I'm aware of, that he really didn't care about children. He just cared about what he was doing with the children.
Do you remember saying that to the sheriffs?
Like I said, I gave him information. Everything possible that I could possibly do to let them know that the children, all this time had passed, and they were not educated.
Now, how much time are we talking about where you think Michael Jackson should have hired a tutor for your kids?
No, I don't think he should have hired a tutor. I think he should have just let me and my kids go.
When you said to the sheriffs, here's a man who has so much wealth, and yet did not even hire my children a single tutor when they're supposed to be in school, what were you referring to?
That he's managed to fool the world, and I was one woman inside there. That's what I was communicating, that what he puts out in the world is not who he really is. Now, because of this criminal case proceedings, now people know who he really is.
Move to strike.
Denied.
Have you done any investigation into Michael Jackson's actions around the world for children?
Objection. Argumentative.
It's not argumentative, but it's not material.
Okay.
We'll take our morning recess.
Okay.